Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. All he wanted was peace, 18 acres of quiet Idaho land, far from deadlines and drama. But when a smug HOA tried to steal his barn, fake his property lines, and turn his ranch into a community wellness zone, he didn't just push back, he brought the whole house down. I moved to Idaho for peace. That's it. After 3 decades of engineering contracts, airport hotels, and chasing deadlines that all felt more important than they really were, I wanted land. Real land. Space. Quiet. Something untouched. I found it in the form of an 18-acre ranch just outside a town small enough that the post office still closes for lunch. The property had once belonged to the Garveys, a family who'd owned it since the late 1800s. I met their last descendant, an elderly man who teared up as he handed me the keys. "It's yours now," he said. "Keep it standing." I promised I would. The place had everything I could want. The main house was old but solid, with a broad porch, a brick fireplace, and beams thick enough to hang a truck from. There was a 2-story barn, red and weathered but sturdy, a half-fallen fence around the pasture, and a stretch of pines so dense it turned black by dusk. Best of all, no HOA. That part I confirmed in triplicate before signing the deed. No homeowners association, no neighbors measuring my grass with a ruler. Just me, my land, and the squirrels. I fixed the fence, patched the roof, installed solar, and restored the barn doors with reclaimed oak. Every evening, I sat on the porch with a coffee or something stronger and listened to nothing. Not traffic, not sirens, just wind through the trees and the occasional cow from a neighboring ranch. Then Clear Valley Meadows happened. The development went up fast. 60 identical homes, bright stucco and black asphalt, all packed behind iron gates less than a quarter-mile from my fence. At first I didn't care. Let them have their community barbecues and newsletter wars. My land didn't touch theirs. And my title was clear as crystal. Still, I noticed them watching when I drove by in my truck. I noticed their dogs barking more often. I noticed them pretending not to notice me. But then came the sign. It was a Tuesday. I'd driven to town to pick up lumber and chain oil, and when I came back, there it was, planted right at the edge of my driveway, bolted into the earth with concrete and galvanized posts. A gleaming aluminum monstrosity professionally printed. "Welcome to Clear Valley Meadows, HOA managed community, private property, residents only." I stared at it for a good 10 seconds, long enough for my coffee to cool in my hand. The damn thing wasn't just near my land. It was on it, 6 feet past the boundary by my eye, and I knew my lines. I'd walked them myself a dozen times. Still, I pulled out my phone and opened my survey app. GPS confirmed it. The sign sat squarely on my side of the property line. My first thought was some kind of mistake, a miscommunication. Maybe some overzealous contractor hammered it in without checking coordinates. I didn't see anyone around, so I snapped photos from every angle, noted the position, then called a professional surveyor. If I was going to rip this thing out of the ground, and I wanted to, I needed proof. Clean, undeniable, notarized proof. Later that evening, I poured a whiskey and sat outside, watching the sun go down through the tree line. That's when I noticed something else. Light. Faint, flickering, from the direction of the barn. I didn't leave any lights on. I hadn't been in there for a week, not since moving the last of the tools inside after resealing the loft door. I set down my glass and grabbed the flashlight from the hook. The barn doors were slightly ajar, just enough to make my stomach tighten. I stepped inside and froze. Someone had moved in. Not moved in like sleeping bags and beer cans. Moved in like they'd turned the place into a storage unit crossed with a low-budget wellness studio. Plastic tubs labeled with masking tape lined the back wall. Dumbbells sat stacked in the corner. A folding table held neatly rolled yoga mats. One wall had actual shelving installed. Cheap particle board, but fixed into the studs with care. And up in the loft, I spotted extension cords snaking toward a strip of warm LED lights, hung like it was a college dorm. It smelled like lavender and sweat. I stood there for a long minute, breathing hard, not from fear. From the cold realization that this wasn't kids screwing around. This was planned. Someone had looked at my barn and decided they had a right to it, like I was just some caretaker they forgot to consult. I didn't call the cops. Not yet. No one was there, and I wanted to be sure. I backed out, closed the doors, and locked them. Then I went online and bought a motion-triggered camera system with infrared and cloud sync. Next morning, I'd install it. Next evening, I'd have answers. And if the answers pointed where I suspected, then hell was about to come to brunch at Clear Valley Meadows. The next morning, I woke up early, even before the sun. Maybe it was habit, maybe it was rage. I skipped breakfast and got right to work. By 7, I'd mounted the first camera on the barn's exterior, aimed at the doors. A second one went inside, tucked between the rafters with a clear view of the floor. I tested the feed. Infrared, motion-triggered, streaming straight to my phone and cloud. If anyone set foot inside again, I'd have a front row seat. I didn't have to wait long. That afternoon, I got the ping. Motion detected, 3:14 p.m. I opened the app, watched the feed load, and there she was. Blonde bob, oversized sunglasses, clutching a clipboard like she was on a property tour. Karen Sloan. I recognized her from the Clear Valley HOA website. President, it said under her name, right next to a grinning photo in front of a gazebo. I'd seen that grin before, in barracudas and vacuum saleswomen. Behind her trailed 4 others, 2 women in athletic wear, 1 guy in loafers and a polo, and a teenager carrying a stack of foam yoga blocks. They moved like they owned the place, pointing, chatting, laughing. Karen made a grand gesture toward the back wall as if to say, "Look what I've done with the place." The camera caught audio too, and I turned up the volume. "And we've got the mats here. The shelving is temporary, of course," she was saying. "Let's aim for Thursdays and Saturdays, early mornings. No noise past 8. Graham doesn't use it, and it's just sitting here. I damn near cracked my phone in half." I waited until they were gone. Then I printed the screenshots, every single one, clipped them together, and marched straight down the road to Clear Valley Meadows. Her house was easy to find. Perfect yard, identical siding, a decorative flag that said, "Gratitude is our attitude." I rang the doorbell twice. She opened it like she'd been expecting Amazon. "Can I help you?" she asked, too sweet to be anything but fake. "Yes," I said. "I'd like to know why you're using my barn as your personal community center." Karen blinked. "Oh, you're Mr. Peterson, right? From the ranch?" I held up the pictures. She didn't even flinch. "Yes," she said evenly. "That barn has been sitting unused for months. We assumed it was available." I stared. "Assumed it was available. It's my barn, my property, and I have video of you breaking in." She smiled. "Oh, Graham, I wouldn't call it breaking in. The doors weren't locked." "Yes, they were," I snapped. "I locked them the night before. You forced it." She shrugged, the way a cat shrugs off knocking over a lamp. "Look, you're not using it. We cleaned it up. We're keeping it tidy, and it's for a good cause. Our community needs spaces like this. It's what we call a reasonable neighbor agreement. You'd understand if you were part of the HOA." I laughed once, short and sharp. "I'm not part of your HOA. My land isn't in your development. And I don't agree to anything." Karen's expression tightened just slightly. "But your property borders ours. It influences our neighborhood aesthetics, our property values. The sign helps new homeowners identify where Clear Valley starts. It's directional. It's 6 feet into my land." I growled. "You crossed the line. Literally." She tilted her head as if I was missing something obvious. "You have to understand, we're building something here. Community, unity. It's natural that borders get fuzzy when people care. I don't care about your borders. I care about my barn, my land, and my rights." I took a breath. "I'm telling you once, remove your sign and stay the hell out of my buildings." Karen crossed her arms, face still calm but voice clipped. "I'm afraid that's not going to happen. You may not see yourself as part of the community, but you're functionally adjacent. And we've decided to treat your barn as an interim amenity zone for everyone's benefit." That word, we. It made my blood boil. Like some HOA meeting gave them a mandate over my life. I turned without another word and walked off her porch, feeling her eyes burn holes in my back. As I passed the sign again, that smug slab of aluminum on my land, I considered tearing it out right then. But I had a better idea. I'd let them keep talking, acting like they had control. And I'd collect every damn word of it. The letter arrived the next morning in a white envelope with a gold foil HOA seal and the kind of aggressive font that screamed, "Pretend legal." It wasn't even in my mailbox. Someone had placed it carefully on my porch table, like a cat dropping off a dead bird. The return address was Clear Valley Meadows Homeowners Association, and the header read, "Notice of Community Cooperation Initiative, Barn Usage Agreement." I read it twice, then a third time, mostly to convince myself it wasn't some elaborate prank. But no, it was real. HOA letterhead, HOA signatures, even a laughably fake community relations coordinator title above Karen's name. The letter laid out, in what they clearly thought was formal legalese, the following. I was to permit the continued use of my barn for temporary community purposes for a period of no less than 6 months. I was asked to sign an attached document called the Mutual Boundary Aesthetic Agreement, which granted the HOA limited rights to maintain, improve, and designate signage and beautification infrastructure along what they called the shared civic interface. And lastly, a friendly warning that failure to comply may result in a petition to the county for violation of community enhancement regulations and denial of access to adjacent public services. I read that last line twice. Denial of access to public services. I wasn't even in their goddamn HOA. I wasn't even in their neighborhood. My land predated their subdivision by 150 years. I crumpled the papers into a ball, thought about lighting them on fire, then flattened them back out and scanned every page. Karen wasn't just being presumptuous anymore, she was building paper trails. I called Jenna Hall. She was the best property lawyer in the county. Semi-retired, sharp as a rusted saw blade, and rumored to have once made a county assessor cry in open court. I gave her the short version, then sent her the scanned docs. She called back within the hour, already furious. "This is complete garbage," she snapped. "These aren't legal terms. This is HOA cosplay. Shared civic interface? That's not a thing." "They're trying to pressure me into surrendering part of my land," I said. "They're doing more than that. They've attached a map." I hadn't seen it. Jenna emailed it to me. When I opened the file, I almost choked. They'd taken the original zoning map, public record, and drawn a new boundary line, one that wrapped around the western corner of my property. My barn, part of my driveway, and even a section of my pasture were shaded in blue and labeled Community Shared Impact Zone. "Impact Zone," Jenna muttered. "You ever hear of that before?" "Nope." "Because they made it up. This is fraud. If they filed this anywhere official, they're in deep trouble." I sat back in my chair, letting the implications settle like dust. It was no longer just Karen being a meddling neighbor. She was falsifying maps and mailing them with legal threats. She was escalating. Jenna told me to sit tight. She'd draft a cease and desist letter, file a preliminary complaint with the county property office, and request clarification on whether any of these documents had been submitted to public record. In the meantime, she advised me to not respond directly to the HOA, but of course Karen didn't wait for a response. That afternoon, HOA volunteers, or whatever they called themselves, showed up at the edge of my property with hedge clippers, mulch bags, and paint. I watched from the porch as they trimmed my already trimmed fence line and spread community blend wood chips beneath the stolen sign. One woman actually brought a measuring tape and started marking spacing for additional signage posts. I walked out and stood by the fence. No yelling, no threats, just watching. Karen emerged a few minutes later, clipboard in hand, oversized sunglasses perched like she was inspecting a golf course. "Please don't interfere," she called. "This is part of our approved beautification plan." "Approved by who?" I asked. "The HOA board," she said, as if that meant anything to me. "Karen," I said slowly, "if you or your people so much as drive a nail into one more inch of my land, I'll call the sheriff." She blinked behind the glasses. "We're operating under the assumption of temporary easement." "There is no easement," I said flatly. "There never was. There never will be. And if you put that in writing, you're committing fraud." That got her attention. Her lips twitched. "That's a strong word, Mr. Peterson. Not as strong as what's coming if you don't back the hell off." We stared each other down. The woman with the mulch hesitated mid-scoop, looking between us. Then Karen finally turned and walked away, waving for the others to pack up. I went back inside, slammed the door, and opened Jenna's email again. Fraud, trespassing, intimidation. We had enough for a case already. But I had a feeling this was just their opening act. By Friday, the footage from the barn was no longer a curiosity. It was a gold mine. The camera I'd set inside was motion activated and recorded in crystal clear HD. Every time someone walked in, it gave me a time-stamped video, and those clips were coming in like clockwork. Tuesday evenings, Thursday mornings, Saturday afternoons, a steady stream of leggings, wine bottles, and yoga mats. They weren't even subtle anymore. The videos showed at least a dozen different people using the space. most of them middle-aged residents from Clear Valley Meadows. They rolled in with coolers, stereo speakers, folding chairs. A few women brought their teenage daughters, who promptly set up what looked like dance routines in the loft area. One woman in particular, wearing a tank top that said "Savasana is life," walked in with a clipboard and a Bluetooth speaker like she was renting the place. Then came the video that made Jenna curse aloud when I sent it. It was Saturday night, just after 7. Karen pulled up in her silver Lexus, opened the barn herself, and let in what looked like a full party of women, 15, maybe 20 people. Inside, they'd strung up string lights. Wine bottles sat on a table by the wall. Music was playing, not blasting, but loud enough that I could hear it in the audio feed. One of the guests held up her phone to live stream the scene, then dropped a 20 into a clearly marked donations box near the door. Jenna and I watched it together in her office. At one point, Karen appeared on camera giving a brief toast, holding a glass of Pinot like she was hosting a goddamn fundraiser. "This is commercial use," Jenna said, pausing the video. "That's illegal. She's charging people. Maybe not tickets, but donations, which is the same thing in court, and she's doing it on your property without consent." "She said it was for the community," I muttered. Jenna didn't even look up. "You know what else is for the community? Jail time. We compiled everything: screenshots, video stills, audio transcripts." Jenna drafted a formal legal complaint, filed it with the county, and attached a cease and desist letter that left no room for misinterpretation. Trespassing, unauthorized commercial use of private property, intentional misrepresentation of land jurisdiction. Oh, and punitive damages for good measure. She also recommended I reach out to a local licensing office to confirm whether Karen had filed anything related to commercial events. Surprise, she hadn't. No business license, no temporary use permit, no event notice. The barn, legally speaking, was a ticking time bomb of violations. And if anything had happened, if someone got hurt or drank too much and fell from the loft, I'd be the one liable. Not them. Me. That was the final straw. I printed out a big red private property, no entry sign, and nailed it to the barn doors. Then I wrapped a steel chain through the handles, added a padlock, and ran a second chain around the back just in case someone got cute. For good measure, I mounted an extra camera on a tree overlooking the drive, one I could watch from my laptop, even zoom in and track faces. That Saturday, no one showed up. Sunday afternoon, Karen arrived alone. She got out of her car, looked at the sign, rattled the lock, and then, without a hint of shame, pulled out her phone and started taking photos of my barn, my lock. She paced around the front like she was building a case. I took screenshots of her every movement. Later that night, I got a text from Jenna. "Complaint filed. Now we wait." I wanted to think that would be it. That faced with formal legal pressure, Karen would back down and retreat into whatever designer cave she crawled out of. But this woman had no bottom, and she was just getting started. I expected the retaliation. I just didn't expect it to be so bureaucratic. The envelope from the county came on Wednesday, thick and official, with that heavy stock paper that usually means someone's about to make your life harder. I opened it carefully and scanned the header. Notice of structural noncompliance, parcel ID, or XJ118340002. The letter was stamped by the County Planning and Zoning Office and listed a string of accusations: unpermitted use of a secondary structure, violation of building safety ordinances, lack of current inspection certification, and, in the most ludicrous twist, concern for public safety due to increased foot traffic from adjacent residential areas. Increased foot traffic from my barn that I'd just locked shut. The cherry on top, a request to cease all use of the structure until further notice, pending a full inspection by county officials, and, if deemed unsafe, possible recommendation for demolition. I read it 3 times before my heart rate caught up. Karen had gone nuclear. She must have filed some complaint with the county, claiming my barn was a danger to the community. Never mind that it had stood for over 100 years, and just last fall, I'd reinforced the damn rafters. I'd spent more time making that barn secure than most people spend fixing their roofs. I called Jenna and sent her the letter. She asked 2 questions before letting out a long, controlled sigh. Was the barn ever officially rezoned? No, I said. It's agricultural use only. Still is. Then this is pure harassment. Let me guess. It's anonymous? I checked. Of course it was. No name, just a reference to community member concerns. By Friday, a county inspector showed up. He was a young guy, maybe late 20s, clipboard, windbreaker, everything by the book. I met him at the gate. "I'm just here to do a walkthrough," he said. "You've been flagged for a possible structure hazard." "Who flagged me?" I asked. He gave a tight, rehearsed smile. "We're not allowed to disclose complainants." I unlocked the barn and let him inside. He went through the motions, measured beams, tapped walls, looked for fire hazards. I answered everything politely, didn't show my frustration. I figured blowing up wouldn't help. He paused at the loft. "You got any flammables stored here?" he asked. Nope. Unless you count dust. Mind if I take a few pictures? Be my guest." He clicked away with a cheap digital camera, then thanked me and said I'd hear back within 2 weeks. The very next morning, red tape appeared across the barn doors. A laminated sign was stapled onto the beam. "Temporarily condemned. Do not enter. Violation pending final review." It looked official, but I noticed something odd. The signature at the bottom wasn't from the inspector I met. It was someone else entirely. I looked them up online, not even in zoning. Some assistant from the fire marshal's office. That same day, a fire truck slowly rolled past my drive. Not stopping, just crawling along like they were casing the place. I stood by the fence and watched them go, arms crossed. By Sunday, the rumors started. A neighbor from 2 streets over knocked on my door. Older guy, Vietnam hat, smelled like pipe smoke. He looked awkward. "Hey," he said, "I just wanted to ask. Karen says they're shutting down your barn. Something about black mold? Hazardous materials." I blinked. "What?" "She's telling folks at the HOA meetups that your structure's not safe, that it's putting kids at risk. You storing propane tanks or something." "No, that's all crap," he shrugged. "Figured. But people are talking. You might want to clear the air." Clear the air. Jesus. That night, I pulled the inspector's badge number off the county website and left a voicemail requesting clarification on the condemnation order. Meanwhile, Jenna was busy filing a formal inquiry into the use of county authority to target private property based on false information. Then came the leak. Jenna's paralegal managed to pull internal documents showing that Karen had submitted not 1 but 3 separate complaints, all under different names, but from the same IP address. One claimed the barn was being used for illegal storage. Another accused me of operating a covert business. The third just listed a laundry list of zoning violations that made no sense, including excessive hay. The kicker? One of the complaint PDFs had Karen's signature at the bottom. She'd accidentally left it in during submission. Now we had hard proof, not just of harassment, not just of trespassing, but of coordinated fraud. The county inspector called me back Monday morning, and I could hear the discomfort in his voice before he even got to the point. "Mr. Peterson," he said, "we've reviewed the initial complaint and follow-up documentation. I need to be honest. This whole thing's become unusually political." I didn't say anything. I let the silence make him squirm. "I'm not supposed to comment on ongoing cases," he continued, "but you've been flagged by at least 3 different departments in the last 72 hours. That's uncommon, especially for a structure that passed every safety check." "So, why the red tape and condemnation sign?" I asked. He hesitated. "That wasn't us. That order didn't come from our office. Someone submitted a form requesting emergency review through the fire marshal's office, citing combustible storage risks and unregistered electrical wiring. That allowed a provisional lockdown pending final inspection. It's legal, but barely. So someone weaponized a loophole." He exhaled audibly. "That's one way to put it." I thanked him and hung up. Then I called Jenna and filled her in. She was quiet for a moment, then said, "Time to open the next front." That afternoon, she filed formal complaints with the county board, the fire department, and the district attorney's office, citing abuse of process, falsified reports, and intentional harassment. She also filed a petition for injunctive relief, a fancy way of asking a judge to force the HOA to back off while our lawsuit moved forward. And to make matters worse, for them, her assistant discovered something explosive while combing through the HOA's meeting records. Buried in the minutes from a 2-month-old board meeting was a note labeled New Community Use Proposal, Barn Access. It included a motion made by Karen Sloan to incorporate the structure on adjacent property for community benefit, pending. Informal cooperation with landholder. That was bad enough. But in the next meeting's minutes, only 3 weeks old, there was a line that said, "Barn officially added to internal amenity map, accessible via itemized HOA key distribution. Facility usage to begin immediately." They'd added my barn to their HOA infrastructure, internally, without my consent, as if they owned it. They had printed brochures showing my property as part of their extended amenities plan. A local printer confirmed it when we called, said a Karen S. ordered 75 glossy flyers 2 weeks ago, one of which had a photo of my damn barn. Labeled as the North Wellness Pavilion. I laughed when I heard that. A long, bitter, stunned laugh. That evening, I checked the barn cameras again. No new intrusions since the chain and condemnation sign went up, but someone had stuck a passive-aggressive sticky note to the door. This could have been a beautiful thing. CVM Community Wellness Team. I peeled it off slowly, folded it, and put it in my jacket pocket like evidence at a crime scene. The next morning, the local newspaper called. Apparently, a member of the HOA board, someone who'd recently resigned, had tipped off a reporter after seeing one of our filings. The headline that appeared 3 days later couldn't have been better if we'd written it ourselves. Private land, public lies, HOA accused of annexing neighbor's barn for profit. The article detailed everything: Karen's fake maps, the illegal parties, the harassment campaign, even screenshots from our surveillance footage. The photos showed wine nights, yoga classes, printed documents, and the flyer with the North Wellness Pavilion caption circled in red. The fallout was immediate. Residents started emailing us directly. Some apologized. Some were furious at Karen. Others wanted to testify. One man forwarded a message thread showing Karen admitting that she handled the situation internally because the owner's an old loner who won't make a fuss. Karen didn't show up to her usual Tuesday HOA walk. Her Lexus stayed parked all day. But someone spray-painted "Private land means private" on the condemn sign. Not me, but I appreciated the sentiment. The courthouse was surprisingly quiet that morning. Just the usual muffled shuffle of shoes on tile, the occasional squeak of a rolling briefcase, and the distant monotone voice of a clerk calling names through a crackling speaker. Jenna and I sat in the hallway outside courtroom C, watching the door like it might explode. Karen finally arrived 10 minutes late, flanked by 2 lawyers in tailored suits that looked like they hadn't spent a day outside an office in their lives. She didn't look at me, not once. Just breezed past like I was a potted plant in a hardware store. That was fine. I wasn't here for drama. I was here for facts. The hearing wasn't dramatic. It was surgical. Jenna presented the complaint like a blade, sharp and deliberate. She showed the court the official maps versus the HOA's doctored version, the flyers, the surveillance footage from the barn, the copies of Karen's fake complaints to the county, highlighted, time-stamped, and traced back to her HOA email and IP address. Then came the big one, testimony from Martin Greer, a former HOA board member who'd resigned a few weeks earlier. He was calm, clear, and, most importantly, pissed. Karen told us during a board meeting that the barn was basically ours already, he said under oath. She said the owner was old, reclusive, and didn't care. She called it a win-win land assimilation. Her words. Jenna turned to the judge. "Your Honor, the defendant did not merely trespass. She deliberately co-opted my client's property for unauthorized commercial use, misrepresented its jurisdiction in official documentation, and attempted to manipulate county processes to remove his legal rights. We are seeking full damages and immediate injunctive relief." Karen's lawyers looked like they were trying not to sweat through their linen. One of them tried to pivot, claiming that community pressure had pushed Karen into making good faith decisions. The judge didn't bite. "You don't get to redefine someone else's property boundary because your HOA thinks it would be more convenient," she said, "and you certainly don't get to profit off of it." That same day, we received the ruling. The court granted a temporary injunction barring the HOA from accessing, referencing, or claiming any part of my property. The fake map and all HOA brochures listing the barn were to be immediately withdrawn, and any digital versions removed within 72 hours. A follow-up trial was set for damages, but the judge made it clear this wasn't just civil. It was bordering on criminal. Then came the real surprise. The county prosecutor filed charges against Karen directly, filing false zoning reports, falsification of legal documents, abuse of administrative process, and unauthorized commercial activity on private land. 4 felony counts. She was arrested 2 days later at her home, walked out in cuffs. No incident. Her Lexus was left idling in the driveway while the sheriff locked the front door behind her. I didn't go down there. I didn't have to. But I did get a message from one of her HOA board members. Short, 3 words. You were right. I watched the tow truck take her Lexus that afternoon from my porch. The wind had knocked down the laminated condemnation sign earlier that morning, and I let it lie there, crumpled and muddy at the base of the barn doors. Inside, the red private property sign still hung bright and clean over the padlock. The barn was still mine, always had been. It's been nearly a year since the hearing. The grass around the barn grows thick in the summer now, left undisturbed by tire tracks or rogue HOA wellness squads. I tore down the old laminated condemnation sign months ago, but I kept it tucked in a drawer just in case I ever feel like laughing at the absurdity of it all. The final court decision came in February. The judge awarded me $320,000 in damages, compensating for unauthorized commercial use of my property, legal fees, stress, and reputational harm. The HOA tried to argue the number down, claimed it would bankrupt them. The judge didn't blink. They should have considered that before printing someone else's barn on a brochure, she said. The check came from a special assessment levied directly on the HOA residents. I expected hate mail. It never arrived. Turns out, most of them were more furious at Karen than at me. Half of them didn't even know what she'd been up to. The others felt trapped by years of her controlling behavior, passive-aggressive policies, and arbitrary fines. The Clear Valley Meadows HOA is now under court-mandated audit. Every meeting must be transcribed and made available to residents. Financial records, open complaints, logged. They even had to install a community mailbox for anonymous grievances. I don't envy the poor bastard who has to sort through that each week. Karen Sloan was sentenced to 9 years total, 5 years in state prison, the other 4 suspended, pending parole and repayment of restitution. Charges included fraud, document falsification, abuse of public complaint processes, and trespassing with commercial intent. Her mugshot made it to the front page of the local paper, smiling in that strained, Botoxed way of hers, like she still didn't quite grasp the concept of consequences. She's currently housed at the South Idaho Correctional Center, minimum security, probably running a meditation circle and driving the other inmates insane. As for me, I kept the barn, but I didn't just leave it as is. With the help of a few volunteers, neighbors, old friends, even one former HOA member who brought beer and a paintbrush, we renovated the interior, sanded down the old floorboards, reinforced the loft, added subtle lighting and display cases. By spring, it opened as a local exhibit, the Frontier Preservation Barn Museum. Inside, I've got antique farming tools, early settler documents, black and white photos from when the property was first staked, even a display about property rights and boundary laws, featuring an enlarged copy of the fake HOA map Karen doctored, with a red wrong stamp over it in bold letters. It's the most photographed item in the whole place. Next to the museum sign on the roadside, I planted a thick wooden post with a clean metal plaque. Just 5 words, private property, enter with respect. And next to it, in the grass, I kept the old HOA sign they once staked into my land. It's rusted now, the paint peeling, the logo barely visible. I nailed it to a crossbeam and labeled it, Relic of Arrogance, 2024. Sometimes people ask me if I regret not letting it slide, if it was worth all the time, money, and trouble. I tell them the same thing every time. I'm not in a homeowners association, I'm in Idaho. And here, we still believe land means something.